Right, Dane Cobain, thanks for coming on. Again, you're a repeat offender.
Thanks for having me. And
No
Biggie's
problem.
here as well. He says hello as well.
Yeah, I can see some fluff in the corner.
Yeah, he likes to come up and say hello. Whenever I'm on Zoom, he comes straight over and sits on the laptop.
Yeah, my cat used to sit on my forearm or the keyboard.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Right, so for anyone who's not seen our previous interview or who doesn't know who you are, can you just introduce yourself quick?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Dane Cobain. I am an indie author. I write a little bit of everything. I suppose I'm mostly known. I do some horror, and I also write a series called the Leipfold Series, which is, I call it like a quirky, cozy mystery series. It's like if Miss Marple had Twitter. And I'm also a freelance writer by day as well.
Cool. So that you've just mentioned the Leipfold series, you've got a new Leipfold book coming out soon. So that's what the basis of this chat is going to be. And then we've both written a flash fiction story that we'll read out at the end. It's interesting because we've got the same prompt, but the stories will be vastly different. So yeah, the Leipfold series that you just mentioned then, what is that for people who've not started that series or don't know about it?
Yeah, so well, again, so I'm really into cozy mystery in particular. So a big Sherlock Holmes fan, a big Agatha Christie fan, and so I was looking a few years back. I wanted to start working on a series because most of my books have been standalones, and I just thought a cozy mystery series would be the way to go. But I have kind of a theme throughout a lot of my work where I quite often look at like technology and the way that that's impacted society, and so I wanted to kind of reflect that as well. So the Leipfold series, it follows a guy called James Leipfold, who has his own private detective company. And at the start of book one, Driven, he's taking on a work experience student called Miley O'Hara. And she's very sort of tech savvy. He's much more sort of old school. He's into, he's got his notebook all the time. He's really keen on crosswords. And yeah, it follows them as they investigate various mysteries. They're kind of written so that you can read them as standalone books, but also there is kind of a narrative kind of taking place from one book to the next. And this new book, which is book 3 in the series, which is called the Leipfold Files, had to pause for a second because the working title was Jailed and Other Stories. It's a short story collection that delves much more into Leipfold's past.
Cool, yeah. So you've got this character then. How did you first come up with this character? What was the inspiration of his creation?
Yeah, I don't know really. A lot of it is sort of playing around with tropes. So, for example, he's an ex-alcoholic because you see a lot in these kind of stories. You have like the hard drinking investigator. So I wanted to kind of sort of tap into that, but at the same time put my own little spin on it. So there are lots of little things like that that all kind of came together to fill out his character. And I think he's just influenced as well by a lot of the books I've read in the past. One as well, he's kind of influenced by Sam Vimes from the Discworld series as well, who he runs the City Watch there. Because I just really like the way that he's not a traditional policeman, but at the same time he sort of is. And the Discworld kind of provides the perfect setting for that. So I wanted to do something similar. And I chose to go with the private detective route pretty much because if you go the other route and have like an actual policeman, you need to know all of police procedure. And it's like, I can look it up for occasional things where I'm like, okay, how would they react in this situation? But if the character was a policeman all the time, you would just need to know everything because otherwise you'd be writing these things that, wouldn't make sense. And you'd have actual policemen reading it going, well, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. So Leipfold is very much this character then who like toes the line between what you're supposed to do and then not by the book as well, isn't he?
Yeah, so I mean, he appreciates the law, but he'll work outside of it if he needs to. He's very kind of results driven. I mean, I would say he mostly obeys the law, but well, as you may have got from the title, Jailed and Other Stories. So he actually spends a little bit of time behind bars in Reading Jail in the short story collection. So he has his past as well. And yeah, he wouldn't hesitate to break the law if it meant that he felt like he was doing the right thing. So I think he's more kind of led by his morals. And sometimes that aligns with the law and sometimes not so much.
How much have you drawn from like what you've already let the audience know from Leipfold's past in these stories coming up?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is just sort of totally new stuff. A lot of it is things that I knew I wanted to go into. So I knew he'd spent a little bit of time in jail, so I wanted to cover that. I also knew that he'd been in the army, so I wanted to cover that as well. And I kind of wanted to cover how the agency came about in the first place. And little bits like I wanted to do a story where he meets Camilla, which is his motorbike. So, and so there was a lot of different things like that where I was like, well, I'll do that in a story, and I'll do that in a story. Other ones were just where I had like an idea for a hook or something like that. And then bits of it. So like, for example, with him going into jail, it's like, well, now I need to have a story about what happens when he gets out and how he kind of reacclimatizes to life. And it's also at the end of the book, I think the last 3 stories, mostly throughout, because obviously it's before he met Miley O'Hara, which is his sidekick. But I think the last 3 all have Miley in, because when I was working on the novels, I kind of wanted to have a sort of a secondary mystery working alongside the main mystery. And so I'd written that in. And then when I was working with my editor, we figured actually it kind of detracts from the story and takes away from it. So there are a few stories there that were originally parts of the novels that are now just sort of standalone stories that kind of, they run kind of concurrently with the first books in the series.
Yeah. So you are an Agatha Christie fan. I heard you mention in reviews and your reading vlogs a lot about Poirot and Miss Marple and other stuff, even Charles Heathcote. You mentioned his stuff. Like, so how much did those works that you've read influence this?
Yeah,
or your interest even in this?
Well, the interest is what kind of led me to write it in the first place, I think, because I'm not one of those authors who will write based on, knowing there's a market or knowing there's an audience. Even with our flash fiction, you ask me like, what genre is it? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. I just write the story and then figure it out afterwards. But yeah, so that was my sort of interest in sort of those cozy mysteries, and specifically cozy mystery. I do read a bit of crime, but like cozy is where my heart lies, really. And so, yeah, they definitely influenced the choice to go into it. And then they did influence a lot of the subject matter and bits of the plot and things like that. Just because there's a lot of tropes and not necessarily cliches, but the ways that things are done. So, for example, I'm a big fan of having that cozy mystery style bit at the end where you get all the suspects in one room and you go from one to the other and you say like, well, you could have done it, but you didn't do it.
Yeah.
You could have done it.
Death in Paradise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which actually I still haven't read, because there were some Death in Paradise novels, although he did write the show first. And I keep meaning to read those, because I actually saw the author, Robert Thorogood. I saw him in about November of last year at an event for like funnily enough, a live podcast recording. And he was really fascinating to hear him talk. But again, like things like that have helped inspire it. I've read all the Morse books. So yeah, there's a bit of everything. And also, because there are kind of darker elements to it as well. It probably, again, creeping in from that horror influence. I've tried to not do it in such a way that it will, really put off the traditional cozy mystery reader. But at the same time, you see a lot of cozy mysteries out there. Like there are a lot of like food themed ones, for example, and it'd be like muffins and murder or whatever. And those to me, those are too cozy. So I like it being cozy, but with a bit of a dark edge, a bit of like almost a bit of noir as well. So like like Dashiell Hammett's books are kind of a bit of an influence as well. So I like to make it a bit of a melting pot with a bit of everything.
Yeah, those food titles are funny. I saw a title of a book called Death by Dumpling.
Yeah, that's about right. But again, it's very much like it's a great genre. It's not where my interest lies. But again, I probably would have gone that route if I'd been trying to be really commercial and to sell as many books as I could. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I could write a book like that. I would be too tempted to put some horrific elements in it, or and also quite often those have like little undertones of romance, and I don't really do romance. So yeah.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that you knew about him being in the army and other bits and pieces. So was the intention always for this to be a series, or did you just write the first book and sort of see how it went?
Yeah, so it was always going to be a series. The reason being, actually, so the Tower Hill Terror, which is book number 2, originally it was the working title of that was Netflix and Kill, which I thought was a great title. We couldn't use it because Netflix owned the copyright of the term Netflix, and it would have just been too much of a hassle. But so I had that concept, and this is the idea of I don't know how much I can say without it being a spoiler, but basically the way that the serial killer operates. because it is a serial killer. We find that out very quickly. I had that idea first, but I realized it wouldn't work if I went straight in with that. So I needed a book to go before that to kind of set the scene, and as it were. So it was always going to be at least two. Funnily enough, as well, the concept behind Driven and the murder weapon that's used in that was from a meme. Just a meme I saw on Facebook where it was like 21st century ideas for like plots for crime novels or whatever. And I was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to use that. So I did.
Yeah. So do the stories form a narrative like in this, or can the short stories be read in any order as well, like the books can?
Yeah, it's kind of like the books in that you'll get more of them if you do read them in order. Some of them are more sort of standalone than others. There's one of them that's almost like a Christmas theme. Well, it is a Christmas themed story. There's an old alcoholic guy. Again, alcoholism seems to be a running theme. Where he's like a bit of he's what you call like a down and out, and he's playing a department store Santa. And then Leipfold befriends him, and they, it's over Christmas, and they realize neither of them really have anybody. They don't really have any family or friends to turn to, so they kind of strike up this unlikely friendship. But that one, for example, that one works perfectly as a standalone. Other ones, like the ones in where he goes into jail, again, you could read them by themselves, but they make more sense, I think, if you read them one after another. And definitely the order of the stories in the book is quite deliberately chosen that way. It's actually the order I wrote them in as well, because I planned out all of the stories, and I figured it's like chronological, I guess, so it makes sense to read them chronologically. But who am I to say? Once you release a book, people can read it however they want to, can't they? So
yeah. So you've mentioned Sherlock before, so there's a few novels and then a few short stories in those stories. Is this? I've never read Agatha Christie or any of the other authors you mentioned. Do they follow similar formats, like Leipfold is a couple of novels and now a short story collection?
A lot of them do, yeah. I mean, I always say one of my favorite Agatha Christie books, certainly one of my favorite Miss Marple books, is Miss Marple's Final Cases, and those are all short stories. I think with mysteries in particular, short stories work really well with them. It can actually be quite a challenge. And actually, I found this right in the flash fiction piece as well, that you need the idea, whether it's flash fiction, a short story, a novella, or a full-length novel. You still need the idea in the first place, and the idea is kind of one of the harder bits to come up with, I think. So I think with those kind of mystery short story collections, they're really interesting because you have like 10 different concepts or whatever, and 10 different mysteries to solve, rather than just the one that you get with a novel. But yeah, so Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle both did similar things where they had shorts and novels. I don't know if I will be doing another short story collection, at least in the Leipfold series. We'll see. Because the thing is, as well, is I wrote it specifically to be a short story collection, and I think my view on it has changed a little bit now. So that if I did do another short story collection, it would probably be much more if I got invited to do short stories for anthologies or whatever, or if my publisher, if they wanted an original Leipfold short story and I wrote it for them. And if I do enough of those, maybe I bring it together into another one. But also part of that is because I've actually got book 4, the first draft of that's written. Book 5 is planned out. So I'm quite excited about getting stuck in with some more of the novels,
Yeah. Yes. Did you have any challenges then writing these stories? Like, you sort of touched on it just then with the idea being the thing that's hard to do. Did you have any other challenges with this collection?
I think the ideas were probably the hardest bit. Other than that, it's pretty similar. But again, that's because of the way that I approached it. So I've got all of the stories planned out before I started writing, and I am very much a plotter. And I think you kind of have to be with mysteries as well, because you have to do a lot of foreshadowing and things like that. So I think once I got the plan done, it was relatively smooth sailing. And I've generally found anyway, the Leipfold books are probably the fastest books for me to write. The Tower Hill Terror, Netflix and Killers it was. I think that only took me under 3 months to write that one. Whereas normally for something like Meat, for example, I think that took me like 2.5 years. So I tend to find the Leipfold stories are a lot quicker to write, in part because I think the characters that they've taken on such a life of their own now that they just write themselves, especially the banter between Leipfold and Miley. Like, if I set the scene, their characters pretty much determines what's going to be said, and they're going to poke fun at each other, and Miley's going to say something that Leipfold doesn't understand because it's all technical, and so there's sort of a lot of it does almost write itself, which makes it a lot of fun to write, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the dynamic between them. I do see that, like how what you've just said would be the case. The dynamic between them, like Miley rolling her eyes at him when there's a technical issue or something like that. The
Exactly.
Crosswords.
And I think that's one of the things a lot of readers have picked up on as well, is that they feel like real characters to the point at which you can just imagine what they would be like. And like, you can imagine what Leipfold would be like at like an awards ceremony or something like that. He'd feel so out of place. He'd hate it, but he'd be trying to work the room anyway. But so, and I haven't really found that as much with any other characters that I've written, I don't think. Some of them come to life more than others. And a lot of it as well, it does kind of depend, because with Meat, for example, the main character in that is a vet called Tom Copeland, and he's got his backstory, but he's also very much like an everyman kind of character. And so actually Big Jim in that, he's another character who he just sort of wrote himself because he's nuts. So I think it's almost like the more of a caricature almost the character is, the more they tend to write themselves, and it is harder to write people who are just like normal people, because I guess normal people are a bit more boring.
Yeah. So what were your like favorite things about writing this collection? What did you enjoy most about it?
Well, it was nice, as with any collection, it's always nice to reach the finish line, so that was always good. And also I had the motivation of some of these stories, again, were already written. Actually, they were a lot of fun to revisit because they'd already been edited as part of the novel, and then I just pulled them out. And so obviously there was a little bit of work needed to be done to stitch them together. But it was fun to then revisit those in the wider context of the full collection. I really enjoyed doing the army stuff as well. It's pretty brutal at times, really. And also because that's set during the first Iraq War, the first Gulf War. And I don't really, I wasn't really old enough to remember that. I think I was probably like 4 or 5 by the time it finished. So obviously I could remember the second one. But so I had to do a lot of sort of Googling, a lot of research around that. I got to introduce a few new characters as well. And probably one of the fun things about it is because there are a lot of these new characters and it's set in the past, it gives me a lot of leeway now to just bring them back at some point in the future. So there's a guy called Silky, for example, and that's like his street name. And he's like pretty much like a petty criminal. He does a lot of like shifting drugs and stolen goods and all this kind of stuff. But he was fun to write, but there's also no reason why I can't bring him back in the future. And I almost kind of want to keep him like he's kind of on file or whatever. So it's like I can bring him back when I need to. So actually, I'm going to be working along with these other plot ideas that I've got. And I don't know when he's going to show up, but I just know he probably is going to show up at some point. And there'll be something that happens in one of the books where I'm like, I need a character to come in and do this. Actually, Silky would be a perfect one to do it, So yeah, I think that was fun. And it was fun to sort of write about them as younger people as well. So another one of the stories features, it's actually the first story in the collection. It features the first meeting between Leipfold and Jack Chumley. And so Leipfold is literally a kid. I think he's 17 or something like that. Chumley's a little bit older, but he's literally just a working like constable beat copper, as opposed to being, detective inspector as he is in the later books. So that was fun. And actually that we get to see a little bit, there's a story about some like pink plastic garden flamingos. We learn that Jack Chumley's wife, she loves these things and she keeps buying them and it does his head in. And then they start disappearing. And so he then has to kind of figure out what's going on there. But that was really interesting for me to write because I know what happens in what's going to be book number 4 in the third novel, which I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say there's going to be a little bit of a rift between Jack Chumley and his wife, Mary. So, and that for me, I thought was a really interesting way to take the storyline because I wanted to, I guess, to look at something that's a bit less glamorous and isn't covered as much, which is like, the sort of slow death of a marriage, basically. So yeah, it was really fun to write those stories knowing what's going to happen later.
Yeah, I bet it'll be really satisfying for the audience as well to see like Silky or someone show up later and be like, oh, that's that guy who was mentioned previously. To revisit people that they're familiar with.
And he'll be like 30 years older as well, or whatever it turns out to be. So so I think that's quite interesting too, because obviously people change a lot in 30 years. So for example, it might turn out actually he's reformed and he's working as a police informant now or something like that, So, but again, I don't know. He'll kind of insert himself into the story when the right time is.
Do you have an end goal with Leipfold? Do you know where it ends, or are you just going?
Yeah, I'm just going. So basically, after every book, I plan the next book. I have noticed one of the issues that I am going to run into is Leipfold's getting an increasing amount of notoriety, and at the end of the third novel, going into the fourth one, like he's essentially a household name by this point. He's been involved in some like big stories that shake the government and things. So so then I'm like, well, where do I go from this? Like, but luckily, again, it kind of writes itself, because Leipfold would hate that. He doesn't want people to know who he is. He's quite happy just doing his thing. And also another thing as well is like the agency's growing, and so he's actually being forced to become like a proper boss, which he doesn't really want either. And so he ends up having to take on new employees. There's a really exciting character I'm really, really chuffed with coming into the third novel, who I kind of wanted to write a bit of representation. I'm not going to tell you right now what kind of representation that is, but also he's a great kind of counterbalance to Leipfold and Miley, because he's almost a little bit in the middle of them. He's a younger person, so he's probably more like Miley, but then that adds an interesting dynamic as well, because suddenly like Miley and this other character can kind of gang up on Leipfold, and he's like, well, wait a minute, I'm the boss. And so yeah, there's like lots of room for development. It's just figuring out what direction that's going to go in. And also, as I say, I try and keep them to be like standalone stories by themselves. So I have to kind of come up with a standalone plot that also kind of advances the kind of underlying narrative, and that doesn't kind of contrast what happens before. And the other thing, actually, because I have like the date at which it's all set, and I think I'm going to abandon that, because because they follow on from each other, I can't really, there's probably between the start of Driven and the end of the Tower Hill Terror, I think it's like 7 weeks have passed or something like that. So before long, if I leave it for too long, it's going to end up, I'm going to be writing stuff set in 2018 and 2028 or whatever. And again, there's things like COVID. It's like, do I want to reference COVID? Do I want to have that as part of the stories? I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to go about that yet. So, but luckily it is kind of written in a way that the timeline works. So actually it doesn't matter too specifically about what year it's in, as long as the timeline all works. And I've kind of covered myself as well, because I have my little introductory note at the beginning that says it takes place in a London that's similar to, but not quite our own. It's like a parallel London, which for me just means I can make stuff up if I need to, and I can move things around, or so I can be a bit fast and loose with the truth, and I don't have to worry too much about the ins and outs of what Scotland Yard looks like, because the police station in Leipfold is the Old Vic, and it's got like a made up newspaper and things like that. So it makes it a little bit easier for me as an author, I think.
Yeah. And that's what I'm sort of doing with an old Victorian, but an alternative Victorian city, which I'm trying to do slowly with the various stories, just slowly putting the pieces together on that, so I can be a bit looser with it.
And I think that like readers are totally happy with that as well. It's more if there's like internal inconsistency. So if I suddenly change the name of the newspaper, exactly, that's when people would get annoyed. But and again, it's all about suspending your disbelief anyway. And another part of the reason why it is in this parallel London is it's a very slightly almost cartoonish, or like it's a bit like Spinal Tap. So everything's turned up to 11. So there's a lot of things that are like accentuated that wouldn't quite work if we set it in our own London, but it's believable because it's sort of that slight bit removed from it,
Yeah, Spinal Tap. Then you mentioned, are you still writing that book, which is Spinal Tap meets what did you call it?
Spinal Tap meets Lord of the Rings, I think I was calling it.
Right.
Yeah, it's first draft is done, and it's probably next on my list to sort of self-edit and then get off to my editor. I will say with that one, I'm not convinced by like the plot in it. There is plot, but it very much comes secondary to like just the jokes and things like that in it. So I don't know. I don't know how the editing is going to go with that one. I might have to do quite a few rewrites, but I still really love the concept. And as I say, the first draft's done. So yeah, it's just finding the time to get to it, you know.
Yeah. So the Leipfold Files is publication date the 1st of June. What formats is it going to be in? Paperback, ebook?
Paperback, ebook, and apparently hardback. Nobody from my publishers has actually mentioned this to me, but it says hardback on the Amazon page for it. So I guess it is. It might, in a future date, be out in audiobook as well. We'll see.
Yeah.
At the moment, I think just Driven is out as an audiobook.
Do you still do signed copies of your books?
I do, yes. So I've actually placed an order today. Well, I got the confirmation from the publishers today that they're going to be sending me, I think, like 20 copies of the Leipfold Files. But yeah, I always keep a stack of, I've got like all of my different books. I've got a stack of at least like 3 of each of them. Because also occasionally I'll do things like blogger outreach as well. So, or like competition giveaways and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Is there like a 3-book package that you're going to do with the Leipfold books?
You know, I hadn't thought of that, but I definitely could do. I mean, I generally, to be honest, I pretty much play it by ear in a way anyway. So I normally do, I think I do $8.99 including delivery. Apart from Meat, which I do $9.99 because it's a thicker book and it costs me more to get them printed. But yeah, basically, if people ask, you know, or they're interested, we'll come up with some deal. Probably the 3 for $25 or something like that.
Yeah, cool. I want a signed copy anyway. When they're ready, I'll have to put my order in.
Yeah, there's I've got to send a few out as well because there's a few people who did little you know, like, well, it's from reviews from Driven, I think, and they asked me if I had any like quotes or testimonials and whatnot. So Katie from Kit Kats Can Read, which is a YouTube channel, and who else is there? Oh, Mary Ann Moronsky as well. Both of them have got quotes on the covers. So I said I'll be sending them a copy just to sort of say thank you.
Yeah. Have you used any quotes from my reviews on like Instagram images and stuff?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Basically, what I've been doing is up until this point, really, I've mostly been focusing on promoting Meat. And so I've only really gone through those reviews, but I've actually started working with a virtual assistant about a couple of months ago now. And her job, she has 2 jobs basically. One is to catalog blogs and to send out, you know, review requests. And the other is we've got a spreadsheet of all of the reviews from Amazon and Goodreads now. So I'm sort of slowly going through and making all of those testimonial images. But because we've been focusing on Meat for blogger outreach, basically I haven't finished doing the Meat testimonials because every time I reach a point where I've done them all, then I've scheduled 2 weeks of posts in advance or whatever, and then when it runs out through all of those posts, there's a few more to do. But eventually the plan is to do all of them, and I even want to do negative reviews as well because I just think it's I think you got to kind of laugh at yourself, you know. So and also, to be fair, like there was one that was a 3-star review of Meat, I think it was, and there was like a couple of nice comments they included in it as well. So I think I used the nice comments. But then in my post, I said like not bad for a 3-star review or something like that.
Yeah.
Because again, I think it's just nice to be balanced, and there's always stuff you can learn from. And you know, sometimes it's stuff you don't agree with, and sometimes it's stuff you do agree with. So you know, it's up to you to sort of take it with a pinch of salt, I guess, and action what feedback you want and ignore the rest, pretty much.
Yeah. So flash fiction then.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got experience of writing it? Have you dabbled with it? Or have you got loads of experience? Or well, what?
I used to do some in the past. Funnily enough, not like mine in the past was much shorter. It was pretty much like paragraph length or something like that. So sort of 250, 300 odd words is probably in between like the shortest short story and the longest flash fiction I've done. But it was interesting because you kind of had the prompts for it as well. And I used to do that with poetry. So I've kind of got some experience doing that as well. I was at one point going to write a flash fiction collection, because the idea was, it was when I used to work in an office, I used to write one poem and one piece of flash fiction every day. It was on my cigarette breaks. And since then, I now work at home and I don't smoke. So so that's kind of gone to pot. And so that project's pretty much on hold. I mean, it's kind of similar with poetry. Like every now and then I get people asking me about my poetry, because I used to do like performance poetry, and I don't really write it anymore. And I've got a couple of books that are kind of ready to come out. I might actually release one of them later this year as kind of a little bit of a gap filler between when the Leipfold Files comes out and whatever I have ready next. But yeah, so I'm kind of out of practice in a way, but it was a nice excuse to get back into it.
Yeah, well, it was a decent story. I don't know if it's your end or my end. Someone started cutting the grass or drilling something. It's probably Bob the Builder next door to me.
Yeah, I can't hear it. I was just fiddling with my wire though on my headphones, so it might have been that.
No, they're still at it. Apologies if everyone can hear that.
I don't think we can. I can't anyway.
Right, good. Right, so I'll read my story first, because yours was pretty good. It's like the when a comedian's about to go on stage following someone who's performed really well. Like, you've sent me your story. It's pretty good, so I'll just get mine out of the way first.
And I have no idea what you've come up with as well. And are you going to share the prompts that we had?
Yes, the prompt, I generated an object or noun on random word generator, which was deserve, an action or verb on random word generator, which was pick. And we were going to do a mystery genre, but we've kind of just let that slide.
Yeah.
So my story, I've not even titled it. I've just realized I've got the word title in place of where I normally write my titles. I'll think of a title by the time this has gone out.
Yeah,
that's what it'll be. So yeah, mine's obviously set in this Victorian world that I'm creating. There's only so much I can talk about in a 247 word story, but that's what it is. What I'm slowly doing is building this like world up of like, so if you read my story, Sweeping the Side Street, there's a character in that which is going to be a recurring character, and not necessarily a main character in all my stuff, but a recurring character. I don't think anyone knows who that character is going to be just yet, but this is a story that has that character in it. So I'll start. Yeah, the man snores and dribbles down his chin from his open mouth. He sits on the floor, back against the wall, head low to one side. It's been a long night for him, waiting for a member of the Order of Occult Eradication to relieve him of the freak boy in his custody. The sound of metal clanking against metal wakes him. He sees the boy, who he had secured to the pipe with a pair of W.V. Adams adjustable handcuffs, is now free. What the Order would do to him if the boy escaped was not worth thinking about. He reaches out to grab the boy, but he's too far away. "Come here, you little bleeder," he growls. The boy doesn't run. The man tries to stand and realizes he is now handcuffed to the pipe. "The locks on those things are too easy to pick," said the boy. "I'm telling you now, laddie, you freaks will get what you deserve sooner or later," he says through gritted teeth. The boy lets out a guttural sound. A raven swoops down from the rafters and around the man's head. It uses the talons on its only leg and scratches him before perching on the boy's shoulder. The boy returns the guttural call. The boy, still stood where the man first saw him, says, "My friend," gesturing to the bird, says, "the Order are here. Before they kill you, and they will kill you, can you pass on a message? You will not stop me from being the person who I am." The end.
Woo! Awesome. That does a really good job of like kind of bringing you into that world. It makes you want to, or at least it makes me want to know a bit more about, what's going on in the background there.
Yeah,
I like that line as well. What was it? Before they kill you, and they will kill you. I like that little bit of dialogue. That was good as well.
Yeah, I think this was hard for a reader to know who the goodie and the baddie is.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's like a morally grey character, that boy.
Yeah. No, it's cool. And like I say, but that makes it kind of intriguing. It makes, or at least, as I say, it makes me want to know more about all of the backstory there as well, which is quite cool.
Yeah, and if I don't mention that, then nobody's going to know until if they were to go back and read through it, they'll be like, "Oh, that's he's mentioned that there, and that's in that longer story, that novel or whatever."
Yeah, it's cool. Awesome, right? So am I doing mine?
Yes, you can go now. And
Okay.
best to start with you. So, marketing, psychology reasons. It's your book that's being promoted.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because, as you said, we were originally looking at doing mystery, and basically the reason why I didn't want to do that is because I didn't want to end up with one unpublished Leipfold short story right before the book's coming out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because then I don't know, then it probably would bug me until I wrote a second collection. But I mean, I think it's worth me sharing a bit of context in this as well, because I actually wrote this on my phone at the Wickham Arts Centre open mic night, and that kind of has a few impacts on it. So it kind of had a musical theme. A lot of the stuff it's sort of loosely based on the Robert Johnson story, who's an old blues musician who was said to have sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. And so me and one of my friends happened to be talking about that, and then I knew I had this sort of prompt to write, and so it sort of built up from there. And then the main character is called Phoenix, and that's because we have a pub near us called the Phoenix, which is like an alternative venue that's like for all the metalheads basically. And we've just heard that it's closing down, so I was like, right, I wanted to do something to sort of slip that in the story to I guess to as a little tribute to it. Which is quite apt for it, really, given the subject matter of the story. But yeah, so I called mine Take Your Pick. And I started with the title, so I did the opposite to you. I had the title first, because I had the title and the rough concept. And so, yeah, and then I actually wrote the ending and then the beginning and then the middle part as well. So it was a very weird backwards way of doing it. But I think it turned out okay.
Yeah, when you were asking me a few questions about it, like, does it have to be mystery and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Had you written it at that point already, or did you do it in like the hour that passed afterwards? Because then you sent it straight after.
I was writing. I was in progress of writing it. So yeah. So I mean, I'd already had the idea, so I was like, I'm going to write this anyway, and if I can't use it, I'll just have to write something else, you know. So yeah. So but I was literally writing it as I messaged you, pretty much.
Yeah.
So. Take your pick, and I'm going to hopefully be able to read this. My cat's getting in the way, but Phoenix met the devil at the crossroads. Her 137,625 TikTok followers had sent her. It was how Belle Delphine had learned the Ahegao face. The secret, they said, was to make a sacrifice. Belle Delphine sacrificed her innocence. Phoenix burned her fender. The devil appeared in a puff of smoke and cracked his fiery whip as though it was a Tenacious D music video. Who dares draw me from my deathly abode, he boomed, with a voice like bold italics with caps lock left on. Don't you know who I am? Phoenix replied. I have 137,625 TikTok followers. Ah, yes, the devil said, my most fiendish invention. Well, your sacrifice checks out, though I'm a Gibson man myself. What do you want? I heard I could sell my soul for talent, Phoenix said. Bloody millennials, the devil said. You think you deserve success because you were given prizes for participation, always looking for something for nothing, like Mark Knopfler. Yes, the devil said, except he didn't get his chicks for free. Well, young lady, I have good news. He clicked the fingers on both hands and the stench of brimstone filled the air. Smoke came from nowhere and swirled around him, solidifying into two triangles in the palms of his outstretched hands. Phoenix leaned forward and looked at them. They were guitar picks. The red one will make you sing like Jeff Buckley, the devil said. And the blue one will make you play like Hendrix. But I warn you, there's a price. There's always a price, she replied. The devil smiled, his black teeth like an echo of a Pam Ayres poem. Take your pick, he said. The end.
Yeah, it's really effective. I like the little lines about the devil creating TikTok.
Yeah. It's weird. There's so many different things. It was whatever was just going around in my head at the time, I guess. And the line about Pam Ayres, his black teeth like an echo of a Pam Ayres poem. It was because at that open mic night, somebody had just read the poem "Oh, I Wish I'd Looked After Me Teeth" by Pam Ayres. So I was like, okay, that's going in there. And so there's all this little bits, and like it's very, it's almost like Foldy in a way, in that there's it's like serious, but there's these little jokes in it as well, like the always looking for something for nothing, and then the Mark Knopfler reference because of money for nothing and all of that stuff. So yeah,
they're really
fun one to write.
Effective little high impact short payoffs, aren't they?
Well, it has to be for flash fiction as well, you know. So and even like you know, you could write pages about the act of summoning the devil, and I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, she needs to summon the devil in about 40 words. Like, how am I going to do this? And so, and then I kind of got away with it by just making the Tenacious D reference. And it was like, okay, people will be too busy focusing on that to think like, actually, I've just said he just appeared. So yeah, it kind of lets people fill in the blanks a bit as well, I suppose.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. That was an experiment to see if this Flash Fiction Friday would work with an interview on it, and then I think it's gone all right, to be fair.
Yeah, I think it was fun. I'm hoping you'll do some more of these so that I can watch them with other people, because I think it works really well.
So can people pre-order the Leipfold Files?
They can, yes. It should be up on Amazon for pre-order. And again, it comes out pretty soon after this airs too. So if people want signed copies, they can just get in touch with me. If you just Google my name, Dane Cobain, D-A-N-E, then C-O-B-A-I-N, you can find me all over the place. So just drop me a direct message on Twitter or Instagram or whatever's your poison. We can sort a signed copy out as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, and we'll probably do it again soon anyway. We'll speak soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next one.